Coming up today on the Nick Craig Show is Kamala Harris, the former vice president and former presidential nominee for 2024. Is she getting ready to make a political comeback ahead of the major election that'll be heading our way in 2028? We'll have the details coming up. And a good Friday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. Don't forget that you can take the show with you 24/7 on demand by checking out the Nick Craig Show in your favorite podcast app. You can also listen online by visiting the website, nickcraig.com. Our show this morning is brought to you by the Law Group here in Wilmington. For any legal challenges you might be facing, visit them online, lawgroupnc.com, or give them a call, 910-251-6088. We'll hear more from them coming up a little bit later on in the program this morning. Yes, it is early February of 2026. And yes, there are major midterm elections that are coming to the state of North Carolina. Obviously, a U.S. Senate race that we'll be keeping a very close eye on. Primary coming up in less than a month. General election later this year. There's going to be a lot of focus, and we'll continue to dive into all of the details of the 2026 midterm elections. We'll have some of the most extensive coverage that you'll be able to find anywhere here on the Nick Craig Show as we move forward through the rest of the year. But it is a Friday after all, kicking back a little bit, getting ready for the weekend. And I caught an interesting set of stories yesterday as it relates to the former vice president of the United States turned presidential nominee in 2024, Kamala Harris. She, of course, was the Democrat nominee, battled against Donald Trump through all of 2024, all culminating in the November election when Trump won 7 of 7 swing states, handily winning the Electoral College, winning the popular vote for the first time as a Republican in nearly 20 years. And one of the things that has been interesting to watch since that period of time, and we're talking about the Democrat Party today, but you could easily put the shoe on the other foot. This is something that is not, in this case, exclusively unique to the Democrat Party, but it's the Democrats just lost, so that's why I'm honing in on them. Had the Republicans lost in 24 and Harris become the president, I'd be having the same conversation about the Republican Party. But focusing on the Democrats, to me, it was always going to be interesting to see how they rebound from what can only be described as a brutal electoral loss. I mean, it was a bloodbath of a presidential election. Donald Trump just wiped the floor with Harris. Republicans had major wins in 2024, gaining a much larger majority than was predicted in the United States Senate, holding on control. I'll note the majority has shrunk in recent years, but still holding majority and control of the United States House. 2024 was not a good year for Democrats. Now, some of that was self-inflicted, of course. Harris had what's the name of her book? 107 Days or something like that. She ran a 100-day presidential campaign, which is an incredibly short timetable and time frame for that. I would argue she's not a great candidate personally. I don't like her, and I think the American people overwhelmingly rejected what she was purporting and laying out as her strategy, her beliefs, her path forward for the United States. I don't think she's that good of a candidate. So you add some of those things up, and it all culminates late November or early November of 2024. And of course, we have watched the results of that since then. And as I mentioned, to me, it's always been interesting, and I've been keeping a very close eye and very close tabs on how is the Democrat Party rebuilding. When you take a big of a loss as they did in 2024, when the American people so overwhelmingly reject your policies, your platforms, your beliefs, if it were me running the Democrat Party, I would say, all right, we've got to take stock of what's going on here. We've got to be able to look into a mirror and do some reflection. I mean, at the end of the day, yes, politics are politics, right? That's not a new statement. You've heard that before. Politics is only relevant if you can win. I mean, your ideas, your principles, that stuff is all fine and dandy. If you can't win, if you can't convince people that you've got the best ideas, the best policies, the best platforms, none of it really means anything. Politics is a win or lose sport. That is the way that it plays out. Many folks don't, I think, wrap their head around that. They're of this mindset that, everybody can kind of win. And that's just not the case, especially in partisan elections, which are the vast majority that you see across the country, where you've got Republicans and Democrats running most of the time against one another. Somebody wins and somebody loses. And leaving 2024, it's very clear who the winners and losers were. Donald Trump and the GOP were the winners. Harris and the Democrat establishment were the losers. That's not up for debate. I'm not opening up any discussion over whether that is true or not. The Democrats lost, and handedly. So what has been done over the last, it's been more than a year now since that presidential election has come and gone. And I think that disarray continues on the left. Some of you have heard me make the claim before that the Democrat Party is in the process of some level of civil war going on. You've got all of these little fractions within the Democrat Party that are all kind of pitted against each other. They've all got their rifles pointed at one another. And it's going to be kind of a last man standing as to who guides and leads the direction of the party going forward. And I brought you some evidence to back that up. There have been top Democrat Party insiders that have spoken anonymously to outlets like the Washington Post and the New York Times and CNN that have laid out pretty clearly the struggles that the Democrat Party is facing right now. You've got the very far left progressive wing of the party that finds what they describe as the Democrat establishment as incapable. They define the Democrat establishment as a bunch of losers, and they'll use 2024 as their example of that, and they want to take a crack at it. They want to see if their policies, their ideas are more appealing to the American public. Now, I think I can clearly state to you on this Friday that that is not the case, that these very, very far left ideas, these very, very far left policies, getting rid of the police, cashless bail, nobody is a criminal, everybody is living on stolen land, all of these great things you hear from the left consistently. I do not believe that those policies and those platforms are something that are appealing to the vast majority of the American people. And those that are currently in what would be traditionally described as the establishment of the Democrat Party, your Chuck Schumer types, even your Hakeem Jeffries types, and some of the individuals behind the scenes, the David Axelrods, the James Carvilles, those individuals know that stuff doesn't play with the American people. Yes, they are Democrats. Yes, I do not agree with probably 99% of what they do, but they understand how the game is played. I mean, specifically when you look at somebody like David Axelrod, who you can attribute a lot of the success of the Obama years, the 8 years of Barack Obama, you can attribute a lot of that to Axelrod. He did a masterful job with Obama and leading the Democrat Party into that. They understand that stuff is just not palatable for regular, everyday Americans. So that's the power battle that's going on right now. And for the Democrat Party, that progressive base is one that is very active, very loud, and I would argue very annoying, right? These are the individuals. They are constantly on the street corners yelling and screaming about this. They are a real pain in the side of the Democrat Party. And so as we go through the rest of this year, midterm elections will probably set the stage as to what we see going and moving forward for the Democrat Party. It is going to be, for me, important to keep an eye on who is leading the charge, who is leading the messaging. And one of the things that you've heard a lot of other analysts say, and I'll repeat, and I wholeheartedly agree with, is the Democrat Party right now does not have a leader. There is no de facto guy or gal that you can look at and say, that's them. That's the person that's leading the narrative, leading the messaging, leading the charge. Barack Obama, who was the last person that the Democrat Party had with that, he's kind of out of the equation. You're not seeing him publicly. He's not going on television. He's not doing mass amounts of interviews. Joe Biden, same situation. He's been swept away. And for the former vice president in Kamala Harris, she's just not very popular. And so that leaves this huge power vacuum at the top of the Democrat Party where there is not one person that you can point at and say, this is the person that is guiding us towards success, guiding us towards victory, not only in 2026, but 2028. Turning our attention to 2028, again, we'll continue to focus on the midterms here as we go through the rest of the year. But yesterday, it was interesting to see that the former vice president in Kamala Harris reactivated all of her campaign accounts. During the 2024 election, she had a group of accounts on social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. It was called Kamala HQ. And you've seen similar political accounts to this if you are somebody that uses and is actively participating in political social media circles. Almost every major candidate has these, a headquarter account, what some places call it the war room. It's a PR account essentially that is connected to the candidate, but not the candidate themselves. And so during the 2024 election, you saw this Kamala HQ account start gaining some pretty big traction. It's got over 1 million followers on X. It's got over 1 million followers on TikTok. They built a pretty strong brand with that account. During the 2024 election, it was obviously promoting Harris, attacking Donald Trump, and vice versa. You saw this with like the Trump War Room account, where it was promoting the president, attacking Harris. It's both sides do it. It's just sometimes different phrasing and different naming. So yesterday, after being dormant now for the better part of a year, the account popped back to life. Its name was changed and its logo was changed, and a video was posted yesterday on Thursday with the former vice president leading what this new account is described as. So before we get into any more detail and information on it, let's hear directly from the former vice president.
Madam Vice President, what's going on with Kamala HQ?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. I have good news. So Kamala HQ is turning into headquarters, and it's where you can go online to get basically the latest of what's going on, and also to meet and revisit with some of our great, courageous leaders, be they elected leaders, community leaders, civic leaders, faith leaders, young leaders. I'm really excited about it. So stay engaged, and I'll see you out there. Thank you.
Not necessarily the most inspiring video from the former vice president, I'll note. Very scripted, not a lot of, from my vantage point, and I've watched thousands of political videos, not very charismatic and not really any enthusiasm behind that. And so with the relaunch of this account, which has now changed its name to just Headquarters or HQ, they also launched a Substack, which is a very prominent online news outlet aggregator. You see many individuals that write on Substack. It's a very popular platform for that. So they've got a Substack set up as well. The name of that is headquarters.news. That is the domain for the Substack. And the only post on there is from Kamala Harris, and it reads as follows. Welcome to Headquarters. I know this past year has not been easy for any of us. In that time, I have taken stock of the state of our nation, and here is what I've concluded. The far right has a 24/7 outrage machine online. They are casting Donald Trump as an agent of change, yet he has delivered nothing but empty promises for the American people. Put a pin in that. I want to come back to that statement. Under his leadership, prices, inflation, and employment are up. Healthcare costs for millions of Americans are about to double, but Donald Trump is not the only source of our problems. We must look at the rise of the MAGA movement. Democrats must improve our ability to convey our message and reach every American, including Gen Z, who is now a larger generation than the baby boomers and are one of our greatest assets as we confront the challenges ahead. That is why I have decided to revive my team's social media operation, Kamala HQ. It will now be known as Headquarters. I am so proud of the campaign we built in 2024 and of the ways Kamala HQ innovated online and brought new young voters into the conversation. But let me be clear, our movement has always been bigger than one candidate. We must be where the people are, and these platforms help us ensure our voices stay loud and our fight continues. The goal of these accounts is to keep delivering the latest information, but it won't just be bad news. We love good news too. And the accounts will share the stories of leaders across our nation who are showing what it means to stand up and fight for the people and for the future that they deserve. This is a moment to organize, and this is how we'll do it. We are clear-eyed with grit, determination, and fire that this moment demands. We love our country, and we fight for the future and fight for the people. Will you join us in this fight? Give Headquarters a follow here on Substack and everywhere else you are online. Again, that post that I just read in its entirety is published by the former, at least her name is on, I'm sure she didn't write it, but is published by the former vice president in Kamala Harris. And it's very interesting that one thing I wanted to come back to in this blog post from her over on this new Headquarters News Substack, it says they are casting Donald Trump as an agent of change, yet he has done nothing but has delivered nothing but empty promises. Isn't that inherently incorrect? I mean, we've spent a lot of time over the last couple of weeks talking about ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, something that the president ran very clearly on, has caused a whole bunch of outrage that's going on across the country right now. I don't know that you could accurately say that Donald Trump is not an agent of change. For those on the left, he is in fact an agent of change. However, it's change they're not interested in. It's change they don't want to see. But I'm not sure that I can get myself to the headspace where I would argue that Donald Trump is not a change agent. And to make the comment that he's delivered nothing but empty promises, I mean, then why are Democrats protesting on streets across the United States? They're claiming that Donald Trump is destroying the fabric of the United States of America, that he is ushering in an authoritarian regime to the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, those two things cannot exist at the same time. If you delivered nothing but empty promises, then you wouldn't have Democrats picketing and protesting now for the past year against the president, claiming that he is completely upending the United States of America. So, I mean, just right off the bat, there seems to be some major inconsistencies with what's going on the ground. And it goes back to the issue I brought up earlier of a lack of self-reflection within the Democrat Party. They obviously do not like Donald Trump. They obviously do not like what he is doing. But to make the claim, to make the argument that he's not changing things dramatically, that everything is just an empty promise, that does not seem to reflect reality at all. That does not seem to be an honest reflection of what is going on across American politics right now. Donald Trump is changing everything. That is why the folks on the left are so unhinged and so out of control. I mean, there just seems to be a huge gap, a huge divide with what Harris writes in like this blog post and what Democrats standing on street corners are bitching and complaining about and have been doing so now for the better part of a year. So, something is not adding up, as I like to say. The math is not mathing as it relates to the discussion and the conversation that she lays out here. So as we continue through this, Harris has relaunched these social media accounts, the former Kamala HQ accounts. They're now called Headquarters. There's a new Substack associated with it. I'll note that it has, at this point, less than 9,000 followers, so it has not really picked up any significant or strong support. And so I started looking at some presidential polling for 2028, and let me be clear. We are way too far away for any sort of predictions, and I'm not making any predictions here at all. But I started looking because, hey, is anybody doing 2028 presidential nominee polls? And in fact, there are. There's not a lot of them. They're not coming out very frequently, but there are some 2028 presidential election polls, more specifically Democratic nominee presidential polls, and I was a little bit surprised with what I saw. So I ran over to Real Clear Politics, which is one of my favorite websites, and their subsidiary, Real Clear Polling, which takes pretty much any legitimate poll that is published, puts it into their database and kind of adds everything up. And it shows pretty clearly over the last couple of weeks, parts of early and mid-January here into the first part of February, that Harris is polling very well in these Democrat nominee polls. The most recent one is out from Rasmussen, which I'll note is a Republican pollster, but has traditionally over the last decade been a very, very reliable poll. They had their 2028 Democrat presidential nominee poll, and Harris was at 34%. Gavin Newsom, who I think many folks believe has done a good job at trying to be that leader. You heard me mention earlier that the Democrat Party is kind of a rudderless ship at the top. There's no person that is really leading the charge, leading the direction. Many believe that Newsom would be that guy. He's 14 points behind Harris. Pete Buttigieg, the great mayor from South Bend, Indiana, at 10, AOC 7, Shapiro out of Pennsylvania 10, and then everybody else kind of in the single digits. So that was the Rasmussen poll. Earlier this week on Monday, that was February the 2nd, Harvard Harris, no relation to the former vice president, released a similar poll, did a similar poll asking about the 2028 Democrat presidential nominee, and it found some similar results. Harris at 39%, Gavin Newsom at 30, AOC at 12, Shapiro from Pennsylvania at 9, Pritzker from Illinois at 7. So similar things there. Back in late January, a group called the Big Data Poll, which I don't know the how accurate their polling has been overall, but it gives Harris a 9-point advantage over Gavin Newsom. It's not until you go back to a poll that was published on Monday, January the 26th, from a group in which Newsom actually has the advantage. 27% for Newsom, 21% for Harris, 8% for Pete Buttigieg. And so I saw the polling, started kind of scratching my head saying, all right, what does all this mean? Then I started looking at the betting markets, right? You've seen a lot of this over the last year or two. Websites like Polymarket and Predictit and some of these other platforms where individuals can provide literal dollar amounts. You're essentially gambling on what you think is going to happen. You can predict, is something going to happen? So according to the most recent Polymarket information, looking at the Democratic presidential nominee for 2028, this data is backing up that Gavin Newsom is overwhelmingly the front runner. He's at 30%. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, is at 8%. Harris is only at 6%. She's tied with Josh Shapiro. So is this a situation, and I'll note that there's not a whole lot of volume on this poll or on this predicting market from Polymarket, because, again, we're talking about something that is more than 2 years away at this point. So it's still very, very far in the future. But it is interesting to see a huge difference in what individuals are willing to put their money on, right? You've heard the phrase a million times, put your money where your mouth is. Anybody that's doing that is backing Gavin Newsom, very clearly backing Gavin Newsom. But if you look at traditional polling data, which we just did, you see a completely different story, that Harris has a very strong advantage. Now, some of that is likely due to the fact that she's got pretty strong name ID. I mean, it was just a little over a year ago that she ran a national presidential campaign. She was all over the country, all over the various swing states, on national television, ads in your mailbox, text messages, emails, television commercials, billboards. I mean, you could not get away from it. Road signs all over the place. And so that might lend itself as to why Harris has some level of advantage at this point, because she is the most familiar of the names. I'm sure most people know who Gavin Newsom is, but unless you are somebody that follows politics, unless you live in California, like if you live somewhere on the East Coast and you're not a super engaged, active voter, you may not know who Gavin Newsom is. You may not know who Pete Buttigieg. You may have heard the name, but you don't know anything about these individuals. They're just names on a piece of paper, right? When you're looking at a poll or answering some of those questions. So that could factor into it as well. There is something interesting going on. There's no question about that. Now, one of the possibilities that I'll lay out here, because the conversation online over the last day has been, Harris is running in 2028. I don't know that that's necessarily true. There is a very strong possibility that Harris received a very large sum of money from some sort of Democrat operative group to take over these accounts. I mean, if I were a gambling man, I would say there's probably a larger likelihood of that one of these big major Democrat donor groups came in and waived potentially because of all the social media following, tens of millions of dollars in the face of Harris and her team, and said, hey, we want to essentially buy and take over these accounts. We want you to be some level of an ambassador for this new entity, this headquarters news that we're trying to roll out. We'll write you a check for 10, 15, 20 million dollars, if not more, and take over these accounts. So it very well could be nothing more than a big payday, which you can't fault her for that. If somebody came to you and said, we'll buy your old dormant social media accounts and we'll make you the face of them and we'll write you a check for $25 million. I don't know of many people that would say, oh yeah, that's a terrible deal. I'm not interested in that. So that's one possibility. On the flip side, I think you could make the case, and I don't know that I'd necessarily argue with you, that she could very well be the front runner for the Democrat presidential nomination in 2028. And this goes back to the fact that it does not appear that Democrats have done any self-reflection on what went wrong in 2024. And still, more than a year after that presidential election, there is no leader. There is not one person that you can point at and say, this is the one that is our North Star. This is the individual that everybody is rallying behind. Gavin Newsom started picking up some steam in the early and middle parts of 2025. His podcast, he invited people like Steve Bannon on and Ben Shapiro, and was trying to have these conversations. He started to essentially got a pretty large social media following going, attacking the administration day in and day out. So he made some movement and was for a period of time gaining some pretty significant national attention. But that fizzled out pretty quickly. I mean, you're not hearing Gavin Newsom in the news as much as you were, say, just about 6 months ago, when there was a lot of discussion and a lot of conversation about him. And I really don't know where we go from here. Now, I don't know necessarily that the Democrats need an answer right now, but as we get deeper into this year, as we get closer to the midterm elections in November, your party, regardless of whether you're Democrats or Republicans, your party needs somebody to be your top cheerleader. You need somebody to lead the charge and lead the messaging. And it would appear that the Democrats still do not have that as of right now. I'll get into some more of my thoughts on this coming up in just a couple of minutes. Plus, we'll get into some of your great comments coming in on our live program here on this Friday morning. But before that, we're going to grab a quick break. I want to tell you about the Law Group here in Wilmington and thank them for their continued support of the Nick Craig Show. Remind you that when legal challenges arise, trust the Law Group here in Wilmington. Since 2003, their experienced attorneys have provided high-quality, affordable legal services across the eastern half of North Carolina. Whether you're facing a divorce, navigating a real estate transaction, or maybe you're in a position where you need a strong defense. If so, the Law Group has your back. Their dedicated team ensures your questions are answered and issues are resolved as quickly as possible. They're not some big national law firm. Melissa Gott and her team live in our community. They're located in downtown Wilmington, and they're just a phone call away at 910-251-6088, or you can visit them online, lawgroupnc.com. Give them a call, 910-251-6088, or visit them online, lawgroupnc.com. The Law Group, experience and dedication you can rely on. We appreciate the Law Group and their continued support of the Nick Craig Show. All right, quick break. More on is Harris running in 2028? Is she getting back into the political fray or not? We'll have more on that coming up as the Nick Craig Show rolls on a Friday morning, streaming live on YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and available 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back to a Friday edition of the Nick Craig Show. Hanging out a little bit of a more casual Friday as it has been a very busy news week. Next week squaring up to be a very big one as well. It's going to be an interesting Monday in the North Carolina General Assembly. Lawmakers from the city of Charlotte who have been under increasing amounts of scrutiny due to the fact that they have allowed rampant crime to take place in their city. That is those local elected officials, including the sheriff and the mayor and other folks, are set to testify in front of a House committee. That's the same committee, if you remember back a couple of months ago, members from a school district here in North Carolina were hauled in front of a committee and asked about inappropriate books in the classroom. That same House committee, led by Representative Brendan Jones, is set to grill Charlotte city officials on Monday. So we'll be diving into all of those details as we head into next week as well. So we're talking about Kamala Harris, we're talking about the former vice president. She's reactivated her social media accounts, the old Kamala HQ accounts. They've changed its name over to headquarters. They've launched a Substack. But the larger issue still exists within the Democrat Party. And we were just talking about that there's no leader. There's not one person that is leading the charge. And that is a clear difference from what's going on in the GOP. For better or worse, Donald Trump is the de facto leader. When there is something that is going on, there is one person that you know is going to lead the messaging for the Republican Party. And that is going to be the Republican president, which is most of the time the case. And typically when you are the opposition party, which is what the Democrats are right now, it would be the minority leader in either the Senate or the House that would be your leader, right? This is your highest elected Democrat official. But those two people, you've got Chuck Schumer in the Senate and Hakeem Jeffries in the House, neither of them really have that. Both of them are not in favor with the progressive wing of the Democrat Party. Neither of them have high approval ratings amongst the very, very far left squad type people that exist within the Democrat Party. And so you've got your AOCs and some other people, and you've got Gavin Newsom, and you've got all of these different guys and gals that are in the mix, but there's no clear defined leader. And that is something that I will contend from a political standpoint. And again, this is not just about the Democrat Party. In general, if your party, whether R or D, does not have somebody that is leading the charge, kind of marching the troops in unison, there is a problem. You don't have a coordinated message. You don't have coordinated efforts. It is a major political problem. And so going back to where I opened the show, I'm not sure that the Democrat Party has gotten over the election loss of 2024. I don't know that they have. I'm not in Democrat circles, so I'm not privy to any of the conversation or information that is going on in these circles. But it seems pretty clear, and we've gotten some leaks from anonymous reporting from major news outlets. Heavy Democrat insiders have talked about the struggles. The vice chair, that David Hoggs kid from Florida, from Parkland, was the vice chair, but he was getting involved in Democrat primaries last year, so they kicked him out, and now he's no longer with the party. So it's a mess. It would appear that it is a mess over on the left. Now, let me make sure I state this clearly. That does not mean that Democrats likely will not be successful in 2026. Just because there's no strong leader does not mean that Democrats cannot secure a majority in the United States House later this year. That does not mean that Democrats may not flip the North Carolina General Assembly later this year. Democrats right now are outraged. Donald Trump, over the last 12 months, has taken the vast majority of their major issues, their major principles, and has destroyed them. He completely decapitated USAID, which was funding a lot of these Democrat groups. He is in the process of rolling out his mass deportation plan, which he campaigned on. He has got them completely outraged, to the point where they're in many cases, flying off the handle. And you're seeing that in real time, where you've got protesters on the ground actively getting into fights with federal officials over enforcing immigration law. That is a group of individuals that are very engaged and very outraged. They're motivated. And one thing I can say for certain in politics, there's not many. The party that has the momentum, the party that has a group of voters that are motivated, and most of the time it is motivated from a portion of anger, they typically are successful. That is why midterm elections always go against the party that is in charge, because it is easy to be ticked off and outraged and upset when you're not in charge and the things that you support, the things that you want, are not happening. Or in some cases, as what we're seeing with this administration, are being dismantled in front of your own very two eyes. You are watching USAID and all of these left-wing NGOs, all of these left-wing nonprofits have no funding. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which funded a lot of NPR and PBS stations, their funding has been completely stripped away. No more free handouts from the federal government. Trump is dismantling a lot of the left's machine, and that has got people really up and really outraged. So I'm not saying if you are a conservative, if you are a Republican, and you are looking towards the midterms later this year, primaries here in less than a month in North Carolina, that you should not be worried about the risk of the House in Washington, D.C. flipping, because there's a very strong likelihood that that happens. And just because there is not that strong leader does not mean that Democrats cannot have major electoral wins later this year. We saw some of this in 2025. We saw what happened in Virginia. We saw what happened in municipalities all across North Carolina. Wilmington, great example. It is now a 7-0 Democrat control of its city council. In Charlotte, there is now one lone Republican sitting on the Charlotte City Council. And it is a similar tack in many other cities, Raleigh, Durham, Asheville. Democrats are still winning elections. They are still doing a good job at getting out, getting engaged, and voting. And Republicans, many of them are asleep at the wheel. I hate to say it, but it's the truth. Their guy's in office. Their guy is running the show up in Washington, D.C., and many conservatives, many Republicans have taken a step back, and I can promise you that that will lead to a sweeping electoral defeat for the GOP later this year if that doesn't change. The Democrats are motivated. They're outraged. They're ticked off. They're mobilized. Now, the issue of not having a leader comes more into play as we get closer to 2028. Now, some of that could be solved depending on if Democrats have major wins in the midterm. You might see somebody that is successful in those midterm elections kind of grab the sword and say, now I'm the leader of this party. I'm the person that's going to lead us to election victories in 2028. There's still a lot of time for something like that to play out, and it very well could. But it is interesting, and I'm going to be honest with you, it is a little shocking and surprising that there is still not a de facto leader now more than a year after a disastrous loss for the Democrat Party. It is rather surprising and shocking. But as I went through the polling a little bit earlier, and you looked at the names on there, none of those individuals are captivating for the American people. Harris was just on the ballot. She lost. Gavin Newsom, while he's popular out in California, his wacko ideas are not palatable for the vast majority of the American people. Pete Buttigieg's claim to fame as being the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and doing an atrocious job running the transportation department under the Biden administration. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a senator that doesn't have, or a House member, doesn't have a whole lot of power. Yeah, she's got a decent social media following, but she's not appealing to the vast majority of people. Then you've got some governors. You've got Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania. You've got J.B. Pritzker in Illinois. There's not really strong names at the top of that list. So it's going to be interesting to track and follow as we head deeper into this year, into 2027, and then, of course, 2028. So that's kind of where we're at with everything right now. Friday, it's been a long week, just kind of interesting little back and forth on what's going on. Some comments coming in. Democrat globalists are getting concerned. SAVE Act, deportations, they need a win. Yeah, they do. They absolutely need a win. And that's, I think what some of the more progressive individuals on the left are so pissed off about right now is they feel like the Democrat Party is not being a stronger opposition party. I mean, you look at the government shutdown last year. 43 days? Longest in U.S. history? What ended up happening at the end? A couple of Democrats in the Senate caved, and Republicans got what they wanted. They did not extend the Obamacare subsidies that have been propping up the failed healthcare system. Democrats lost that battle. Now they can think that they won. They can look at polling and say, oh, look, polling says that we won the shutdown. The reality is you guys wanted the subsidies extended. It didn't happen. That is a big, fat freaking L. You lost. I don't know. The data and the polling doesn't really matter to me. You wanted something. You didn't get it. There was no compromise. You lost. And that is something that is outraging to, again, those more radical types that you've seen out at the protests, standing on the street corners, doing their national day of action on this or their national day of action on that. It's very frustrating for them. And I mean, to some extent, you see a similar thing on the right, right? When Joe Biden was in office and you had Republicans that were bending over backwards to work with the administration, the GOP was pissed off. Myself, many of you were just livid with what you were seeing from national Republicans. And that outrage, that motivation is what drove a lot of people to the polls in 2024, which led to Donald Trump's victory. So that's kind of where I see everything right now. Politics changes very quickly. You've heard me say that plenty of times. The events that will decide things in many cases may have not even happened yet. So none of this is set in stone. But as we sit here on this Friday morning, February the 6th, this is where I see things right now. And it's going to be very fascinating to watch how this continues to roll out in the weeks and months ahead. So a little bit more of a casual Friday. Hopefully you enjoyed the conversation this morning. We'll see if Harris continues to stay more active and if she starts building out what would be a much longer presidential campaign than the one that she had in 2024. We're going to take a quick look at our weekend weather here across southeastern North Carolina. I need to get into a better habit of doing this as we head into the weekend. Fortunately, we're not talking about any snow affecting our area. That was obviously the big topic of conversation last weekend. Temperatures, they don't look phenomenal. They're not like crazy during the day, but mid 40s Saturday and Sunday. Temperatures will be very low Saturday night into Sunday morning, in the 20s once again. Fortunately, as we head into next week, we are looking at temperatures Monday in the mid 50s, Tuesday 60, and Wednesday potentially getting close to 70 degrees. So temperatures looking pretty nice as we head into Valentine's Day weekend coming up next Saturday. We'll keep an eye on the forecast. We'll look at that as we head into the latter parts of next week. Well, that's going to do it for a Friday edition of the Nick Craig Show. Thanks to the Law Group here in Wilmington for their continued support. Don't forget, you can catch the show live weekday mornings, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, weeknights, 9 to 10 p.m. on WBT Radio in Charlotte, and of course, 24/7 in your favorite podcast app. Thanks for joining us on this Friday edition. Have a phenomenal weekend. We'll be back with you Monday morning right here on the Nick Craig Show.